We might think that spoiler warnings are a modern phenomenon, a consequence of widespread immediate communication via the internet, combined with a set of blabbermouths on social media who can't or won't keep their proverbial flaps shut. It's not something that really troubled video games in their infancy though, probably because most of their plots revolved around get high score or kill bad guy. As the medium has grown in sophistication, so too have its narratives, and with it, plot has become just as important as gameplay. We no longer know that a game will end with your generic dude rescuing a helpless princess, and after time sinks stretch into the dozens of hours, we especially don't want that ending ruined. Just as well, video games are so distracting then. Look a bit closer in these examples and you'd actually unearth all their secrets from the off. My name is Rach and this is WhatCulture Gaming. Here are 10 amazing pieces of video game foreshadowing. 10. Funeral March for Queen Berry, Conker's Bad Fur Day. Rare's foul-mouthed squirrel sim isn't shy about parodying Hollywood, albeit with an extra layer of profanity, spoofing everything from Blue Velvet to Monty Python and the Holy Grail. So it's unlikely anybody batted an eyelid at the intro during their first playthrough, an almost direct rip of A Clockwork Orange's famous milk-sipping curtain raiser. The opening of the Kubrick classic is overlaid by Wendy Carlos's electronic interpretation of Henry Purcell's Funeral March for Queen Mary, written in 1696 for the deceased Mary II. The piece has no special significance to Alex DeLarge, but its mournful lugubriousness has added meaning in Conker. At the end of the game, the scatological squirrel's would-be bride Berry is rather carelessly killed and then sucked into space. Suddenly, the game's introduction, which takes place at the end of the story, adopts a whole new, infinitely more depressing meaning. 9. Wrinkly 64, Donkey Kong Country 3. Back in the day, Rare made a habit of being right sly buggers, using their tight-knit relationship with Nintendo of America to drop little hints about the future throughout the production of their games, making themselves look like right smarty pants in the process. The third game in the Donkey Kong Country series came so late in the SNES's lifetime that many had already moved on from the aging console, and if they hadn't, they sure had one eye on what Nintendo had up their sleeve next. So too did Rare. Sometimes, when the player enters one of Wrinkly Kong's save caves in Donkey Kong Country 3, they can distract the octogenarian ape from playing on an N64. Mere months after the console's release. What game is she playing, you asked? Well, based on the familiar melody, it's none other than Super Mario 64. Mario's iconic 3D adventure had barely released in North America just 2 months previously, and didn't release in the EU until the following March. Very clever, Rare. 8. Gobi Gets the Hump, Banjo Kazooie. The Twycross tricksters at Rare were at it again with their Bear and Bird Blast Banjo Kazooie, making a whole slew of references to a sequel far from guaranteed. The game's infamous ending lives on in video game folklore. Whilst sipping pina coladas on the beaches of Treasure Trove Cove to celebrate their victory over the Wicked Witch Gruntilda, the usually short-sighted Bottles pops up out of his hole with a series of visions from the future, revealing the existence of a set of secret eggs that could be transferred to the sequel, Banjo Tooie. The silly name stuck, but technical limitations meant that the so-called stop and swap never saw the light of day. Another piece of crafty foreshadowing did come to fruition, however. After being ground-pounded yet again in Click Clock Wood, a thoroughly fed-up Gobi vows that he's off to the lava world where he can be free from Ursine torment. Sure enough, Banjo and Kazooie find him in Banjo Tooie's Hailfire Peaks, and subject the poor camel to yet more torture. 7. Gotta go fresh! Gotta go fresh. Rad Mobile. And now for our quick trivia question round. In which game did Sonic the Hedgehog make his debut appearance? If you answered Sonic the Hedgehog, obviously, firstly, less of your cheek, and secondly, it's a good answer, but incredibly wrong. 6 months before Naoto Oshima's blue blur freshened up the North American Genesis market, he was freshening the dashboard of a Ferrari 330p4 Type, dangling rather morbidly from its rear view mirror in Sega's coin-up Rad Mobile. Interestingly, Sonic's former rival Super Mario also made his bow outside his own franchise, known as the ever-descriptive Jumpman as he battled Donkey Kong in the 1981 arcade smash hit. 6. Badge to the Future, Phoenix Wright. During Rise from the Ashes, the stunning additional case from the DS re-release of the first Ace Attorney, Phoenix Wright is confronted with his toughest client yet. Lana Skye, a prosecutor immediately resigned to her guilt. Turns out she has a bloody good reason for her fatalistic outlook. She can predict the future. Throughout the series, the player can present Phoenix's daft attorney's badge to various witnesses to prove his credentials. There's rarely any point, but in Lana's case, she comes back with this scarily prescient comment. Whew! Sure enough, 3 years later, after Rise from the Ashes, Phoenix finds himself disbarred in Ace Attorney 4. Whew, spooky. She was wrong about being guilty though, mind. 5. Peek-a-Naboo, Star Wars Rogue Squadron. The N64's superb slice of Star Wars space shooting didn't just foreshadow the finer points of its own plot, but ultra top secret details of the hotly anticipated Phantom Menace, the first movie in the franchise in 16 years. An arcade cheat code, seemingly a reference to Swedish guitarist Yngwie Malmsteen, allows the player to pilot Episode 1's Naboo starfighter, despite the game releasing a full 6 months before the movie. Talk about a spoiler! Well, it would have been anyway, but for the fact that nobody knew about the craft's inclusion until The Phantom Menace finally hit cinemas. Studio Factor 5 went to extreme lengths to keep the Naboo starfighter under wraps, hiding the bonus vehicle behind scrambled codes, even neglecting to tell key members of the development team about its existence. Makes you wonder why they bothered, really. 4. Oh brother, there art thou. Final Fantasy IX. This is a case of historically shaky localization brilliantly concealing an extremely obvious plot reveal. When Zidane and his ragtag band of buddies meet antagonist Kuja at the Yifa tree during the middle portion of the criminally underrated Final Fantasy IX, the oddly ape-like hero demands answers. By this point in the game, the player is already well accustomed to the, strangely sexy Kuja speaking in riddles, talking utter bollocks in other words, and it's easy to gloss over his clunkily phrased rejoinder as nothing more than a bit of sketchy translation. Oh brother, but you're not ready yet. Turns out it isn't just the villain slipping into his best Hulk Hogan impersonation, it later emerges that Kuja and Zidane really do share a mother, or at least a genome pod. So there you go. 3. I Know You, Red Dead Redemption. At the end of Red Dead Redemption, instead of literally riding off into the sunset in a typically happy ending, protagonist John Marston is made instead into Swiss cheese by the rifles of a battalion of US federal agents. It is a heartbreaking conclusion, and one that comes as a complete surprise, unless you had been paying close attention. Throughout the game, Marston repeatedly encounters a strange man in a stovepipe hat who seems to know an inordinate amount about him. After completing a set of side missions, the two meet once more at a riverbank in Beecher's Hope. The stranger cryptically notes that it'll make a fan spot, and there are 2 marks which indicate where John and his wife Abigail will later be buried. 2. This guy our spoiler, Final Fantasy VII. Early on in Final Fantasy VII, whilst escorting brand new Belle Aeris home to her oddly verdant slumside cottage, Cloud Strife stumbles upon an ill chap living in a disused jet engine. Lost amongst the hilarity of the brilliantly bad "this guy are sick" mistranslation is the deeper significance of this scene. Specifically that the guy has a strange number 2 tattoo. Despite all her knowledge of the ancients, Aeris can't explain the mysterious marking, and the pair and the player promptly forget about it. It's revealed much, much later that the citizens of Nibelheim were experimented on by Shinra's own Dr. Hojo, who injected them with Genova cells and marked them with a number. This poor lad in the pipe? He was one of them. 1. Time Travel Agent. Grim Fandango. Like all of the greatest examples of its genre, Tim Schafer's neo-noir classic Grim Fandango bathes in the gloom of its foreshadowed plot. Pretty much every detail of the narrative is subtly nudged at within the game's opening 10 minutes. In the introduction cinematic, Manny Calavera presents a set of brochures to his latest client, detailing how she can make her way through the land of the dead to the other side. It turns out that it's Manny who travels by car, ship, and then train during his 4-year trek. There's even a picture of a ship in year 1, upon which Manny comments, "I wonder if I'd be happier working on a ship. Then again, I'm so competitive, I wouldn't be able to relax until I was captain." Sure enough, in year 3, he rises up the ranks to become the head of the SS La Mancha's crew. But wait, there's more! During the very first conversation in the game between Manny and Aoife, Manny insists his secretary is working for someone else. A panicked Aoife gets the wrong end of the stick under the impression that Manny has blown her cover as a double agent for Salvador Limones's resistance movement. When it turns out that Manny was just merely talking about taking messages for business rival Domino Hurley, she breathes a sigh of relief. We all have our secrets, she coyly notes. We could go on, it's a bit of a masterpiece. Any other examples of genius foreshadowing that you noticed you want to share with us? Be sure to comment in the comments below. You can like the video, you can share it, you could even subscribe if you want to see lists like this every single day. Guys, I have been Rach, this has been WhatCulture Gaming. Thank you so much for watching, we'll see you again tomorrow.